Welcome back, Wayfinders. Today should be an exciting day as we get to unpackage and mount the Norton Pike sharpening stone that I picked up from Lehman's before I left the US. You can see it's a pretty cheap stone. It's only $30, but it's the only one that they sell of this size. You can see the brand name is Pike with a Norton manufacturing. These two joined forces back in the 1800s to create the 1-inch by 2-inch by 8-inch sharpening stone. On the bottom of the box here, you can read the entire history for yourself. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the important part, see if we can get this sucker opened up and mounted onto a piece of wood so that it's not scratching whatever surface that I put it on. As with most of these types of sharpening stones, there's going to be a coarse side and a fine side, and we need to create a base where we can flip this stone over at will and use either side. So here we go. I start off with a piece of birch firewood. Hand planed went down one side to make it extremely flat. This took a lot longer than I expected, but since I don't have a joiner or a router in my current shop, I had to do it all by hand. Tried using a scraper here to remove the larger pieces of bark, and I eventually switched over to a hand chisel. In order to hold the piece of wood in place, I placed a 2x8 against the wall, and to give me a lot of leverage to start chiseling away at this material. The planer comes back here to create a nice flat spot on top where I can start marking out the stone and digging down with a chisel to create a small recess. I originally got this idea for a sharpening stone holder from my grandfather. While we were cleaning up his estate a few years ago, we found a couple of these out in the shop that he used for hand sharpening his chisels and hand sharpening the planers, one of which I'm using here to create the next generation of stone holder. The plan was to leave this as a rustic piece of firewood holding a stone, but I got a little addicted to the hand planer and making those beautiful curls of wood that I planed the whole thing smooth before squaring off the ends here with a pole saw. Now I'm using a 4.5-inch speed square that I bought because I thought it was adorable, but I ended up using it almost on a daily basis out in the shop. These days, there's a lot of different ways to sharpen your knives, chisels, and planers. They have custom-made specialty equipment that does a fantastic job. There's diamond edge stuff out there. There's work sharps. There's a whole litany of different ways to attack your gear and to take really good care of it. I just personally happen to be a fan of some of the older methods, even though there are better and more modern methods out there today. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a work sharp in my shop in order to sharpen the kitchen knives when I'm feeling lazy. If I had to choose one way of sharpening all of my tools for the rest of my life, I would set the bevel with a 10-inch crosscut file, and I would hone the edge with a Gransford Bruck or a Holtzbruck sharpening puck. If you're not familiar with the term sharpening puck, I have a video that's dedicated to the Holtzbruck sharpening puck, which is my favorite version of this sharpening device, and it works really well for me out in the field. I've been using it now for over 1.5 years since that video was put out, and I haven't had a single complaint so far. However, I do need a little more surface area on my sharpening surface, which is why I have this stone specifically and why we're putting it together here today. Now you could easily use this without building a hand-carved birch stone holder, but personally I like to have this to catch all the oils that are coming off the stone as you use it, and also to stop the stone from scratching whatever surface you're putting it on. This way you don't end up with a bunch of scratches in your kitchen table while you're working a knife back and forth. I'm doing a light charring around the edges here to give it a nice antique look so it doesn't look like bright, freshly sanded wood. I'm going to take a light sanding with 120 grit sandpaper to knock off any charcoal so that it doesn't cause a mess when I'm using this, and it leaves this nice patina. One more quick check here with the stone to make sure that I didn't warp the wood too much with the charring, which can be the case, and then I'm going to soak it in a little bit of antiquing oil. Now over time, the oil from sharpening stones is going to soak into this, and it's going to get darker and darker and look older and older. For now, I love the way it looks. I'm going to clean up the surface and go ahead and move on to actually testing this thing out and seeing if I can put an edge on an SE4 knife. A little bit of oil goes a long way into maintaining your stone, so I'm going to start with the oil and then start grinding that bevel into my knife instead of using a file. The coarse side is excellent for resetting these bevels. I'm going to put a good amount of pressure on it as I grind it back and forth, and I'm going to ensure that I do the same amount of work on either side of the knife so that I maintain an equal bevel and don't come out with something that looks more like a chisel or a planer blade, which is only sharpened on one side and tends to cut through the wood in a curved fashion. I'm using a file method here where I push hard and then lightly drag back across to make sure that the bevel is even all the way down. Flip the stone over to the fine side, and this is where I'm going to add a little bit more oil and start refining that edge. A lot less pressure and a little more consistency goes a long ways here. I start with the same circular grinding method, but then I will end with these light strokes, one on either side, to maintain equal bevel and hone that edge back and forth, lighter and lighter, until I'm happy. You can go on and refine this further with leather, but for today we're going to clean it up and see if we've increased the sharpness at all. This knife was dull as a butter knife when we started, so hopefully we can do a little cutting with it. So let's see where we're at. I always prefer to test my tool on whatever it is going to be used on, so we're going to be creating some feather sticks instead of slicing up paper or cardboard. Seems to cut pretty nicely. I could use a little more refinement on the edge, but so far I'm happy. We're still giving away stickers on the channel, so if you would like some, just shoot an email to followthecompassnorth@gmail.com. All we need is your address so we can send you an envelope. Don't worry, you don't get put on any mailing list, and we don't send you anything else. This is just a little kickback for the viewers out there who appreciate our content. Thank you, and have a lovely night.